Hello, my name is Michael Turner. I'm 36 years old, living in Eugene, Oregon, a small town with tree-lined streets and gentle, picturesque afternoons. I'm not the type to go on about my life, but this story, I think, is worth sharing. It began on an evening I'll never forget, an evening when the entire world I'd built suddenly trembled as if it were about to collapse. My wife Emily and I run a small flower shop called Petal Haven at the corner of Eugene's Maple Avenue. The shop isn't big, just a cozy space with wooden shelves brimming with carnations, roses, and daisies. Every day we wake up before the sun rises, meticulously tending to each bouquet, carefully wrapping them in rustic craft paper. The work isn't easy, but it's everything we have. And through every penny saved, every late night spent balancing the books, we managed to buy a small house in the suburbs. That house, with its white picket fence and garden full of wildflowers, is our greatest pride. It's not just a place to live. It's proof of the sweat tears and love we've poured into each other. That fateful evening, I was at home, sitting in the old armchair in the living room, the warm glow of the lamp illuminating the framed photos on the wall. Our wedding picture, Emily and me smiling brightly next to our first flower pots. Emily was still at the shop handling a late order. I was sipping coffee, savoring a rare moment of peace when the doorbell rang. It was urgent, insistent, as if someone was trying to break the door down rather than ring it. I frowned, set my coffee down, and thought it might be a neighbor needing help. But when I opened the door, I froze. Standing before me were my parents, rigid under the porch light, their faces tense, their eyes heavy with an oppressive weight. Next to them was Dylan, my younger brother, looking disheveled, his hair a mess, his gaze avoiding mine. A chill ran down my spine. "What's going on? Why are you all here?" I asked, my voice faltering with an uneasy premonition. My father Frank didn't bother with greetings and got straight to the point. "Michael, we need to talk now." His voice was icy, as if I were an employee who'd messed up, not his son. My mother Evelyn just stood there, clutching her purse tightly, her lips pressed into a thin line. I invited them in, trying to stay calm, even though my heart was starting to pound. "What's so serious that you all show up at this hour?" I asked, sitting down across from them. My small living room suddenly felt stifling, as if all the air had been sucked out. My father cleared his throat, his gaze piercing into me, devoid of warmth. "Dylan's in trouble. He owes money. A lot of it." I turned to Dylan, waiting for an explanation. He muttered something incoherent, but I caught fragments like investment and mistake. Anger began to simmer inside me. "How much?" I asked, my voice hardening. $180,000. My father answered for him as if it were a normal figure. I felt the blood rush to my head, but before I could speak, my mother cut in her voice, trembling but resolute. "Michael, you're his older brother. You have to help him. Dylan's your brother." I almost laughed, not out of amusement, but out of bitterness. Help Dylan again. I looked at my brother, the one who'd been spoiled by our parents since childhood, given everything without ever having to work for it. While I slaved away washing dishes at diners or delivering packages in freezing snowstorms. Dylan was always sheltered, celebrated as the golden child. He grew up with lavish parties, expensive trips, and now what? A massive debt from reckless investments. How am I supposed to help? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fury boiling inside. "Emily and I don't have spare cash to cover a debt that big." My father frowned as if my question was an insult. "You have this house?" He said, his voice flat but sharp as a blade. "Mortgage it. Use the money to pay off Dylan's debt. It's the only way." I felt like I'd been slapped across the face. This house, the house Emily and I had poured our sweat and tears into, the place that held all our dreams, was being treated by my parents as something to sacrifice for Dylan. I shot up from my chair, my fists clenched. "No!" I said, my voice shaking with anger. "This house belongs to me and Emily. We worked ourselves to the bone to have it. I'm not gambling it away for Dylan's mistakes." Dylan finally spoke, his voice weak, almost pleading. "Michael, you don't understand. If you don't help, they'll kill me. Do you want to see me dead?" I spun toward him, my anger exploding. "Kill you? Who's going to kill you, Dylan? Who do you owe? What did you do with that money? Gambling again, throwing it into some shady project you didn't even bother to research." I was nearly shouting now, years of pent-up frustration pouring out like a flood. "Your whole life you've been coddled by Mom and Dad. You got everything you wanted while I had to scrape by. Now you've ruined your life, and I'm supposed to pay the price." My mother burst into tears, but not for me. She rushed to Dylan, wrapping her arms around him as if he were the victim in this story. "Michael, how can you say such things? Dylan's your brother. Can't you think of him? You're so selfish." I stood there stunned. Selfish me. The one who'd worked himself to exhaustion to build this life, called selfish for refusing to sacrifice everything for my brother. I looked at my father, hoping for some shred of fairness. But he just shook his head, his eyes full of disappointment. "If you don't help, don't consider us family anymore," he said, his voice low but sharp as a knife. His words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I wanted to scream, to ask when they'd last treated me like family, but my throat tightened. I just stood there as my parents and Dylan got up and left my house without a goodbye. The door slammed shut, leaving me in a living room that now felt colder than ever. I collapsed into the chair, my mind reeling. This small house where Emily and I had laughed, dreamed, and planned our future had become a battleground. Everything I'd built, everything I loved was under threat. I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the tears welling up. I wasn't crying because of my parents' threat, but because I realized deep down that I'd never truly had a family. The wind chimes outside clinked in the night breeze, as if warning me of the storm approaching. I knew Emily would be home soon, and I'd have to tell her everything. I sat there in the now chilly living room, the soft yellow glow of the lamp casting light on the framed photos on the wall. Each picture was a piece of the happiness Emily and I had built our wedding day. The moment we cut the ribbon to open the flower shop, Emily's radiant smile when she first crafted a perfect daisy bouquet. Those memories, once my greatest comfort, now felt like knives twisting in my chest. The sound of the door lock clicking snapped me out of my chaotic thoughts. Emily stepped inside, her brown hair tousled by the wind, her thin coat damp with rain. She smiled that gentle smile that always made the world feel less harsh. But then her eyes met mine. The smile vanished. "Michael, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. She set her bag down and hurried to my side, her small hands resting on my shoulders as if checking to see if I was truly okay. I looked up at her, trying to find the words, but my throat tightened. How could I tell her that my family had just demanded I mortgage our house, the home we'd poured our sweat and tears into building? How could I say that they were ready to disown me because I refused to save Dylan from his own mistakes? Emily sat beside me, her warm brown eyes fixed on mine, patient and unhurried, waiting for me to speak. Her patience only deepened my guilt. Finally, I took a deep breath, and the story poured out like water bursting through a dam. I told her about my parents and Dylan showing up unannounced, about the massive debt Dylan had racked up, about how my parents insisted I mortgage our house to bail him out. I spoke of their favoritism and their threat to cut ties if I didn't comply. My voice wavered, swinging between anger and anguish. It felt like I was tearing open an old wound, exposing the pain I'd tried so hard to bury. Emily listened without interrupting, but I could see her eyes growing red. When I got to the part about my parents leaving with their ultimatum, she grabbed my hand, squeezing it tightly. "Michael," she said, her voice trembling but resolute, "this house is ours. No one, not even your family, has the right to take it away. No one has the right to force you to sacrifice what we've built." I looked at her, overwhelmed with gratitude, but also aching with pain. "You don't understand, Emily," I whispered. "They're my family. No matter how they've treated me, they're still my parents. If I refuse, they'll never forgive me. But if I agree, well, lose everything. I lowered my head, the weight of the dilemma crushing me like a boulder. On one side was our home, the place where Emily and I dreamed of a happy future. On the other was my family, who, despite all the bitterness, I couldn't fully turn my back on. Emily wrapped her arms around me. "I believe in you, Michael," she whispered. "You've always found a way to do the impossible. Well, face this together, okay?" Her words were like a gentle breeze, easing the storm in my heart, but not enough to silence it. I nodded, though my mind was still in turmoil, and I held her tightly as if she were my only anchor in that moment. That night I lay in bed, unable to sleep. Beside me, Emily had drifted off, her steady breathing the only sound in the quiet room. But in my head, my parents' words echoed like a broken record. "If you don't help, don't consider us family anymore." I closed my eyes, trying to push it away, but old memories flooded back, sharp and painful like shards of broken glass. I remembered growing up with Dylan in our cramped house on the outskirts of Eugene. I was the older brother, but in my parents' eyes, I was always the invisible one. Dylan, with his bright smile and outgoing personality, was the center of their world. When I got good grades, they'd nod, absently. But when Dylan won a youth basketball game, the house turned into a celebration. I remembered giving up toys, giving up the best portions of food because Mom would say, "Dylan's younger. You have to let him have it." I remembered nights sitting alone in my room, listening to my parents' laughter with Dylan outside, feeling like an outsider in my own family. As we grew older, the favoritism never faded. While I worked tirelessly to save for college, Dylan was funded for lavish vacations. When Emily and I got married, my parents attended with reluctant expressions. But when Dylan bought his first car with a loan, they bragged to the whole neighborhood as if it were a family triumph. I tried not to let it bother me, tried to build my own life. But now even this house, our greatest achievement, was threatened because of that same favoritism. The next morning, faint sunlight filtered through the window, casting delicate streaks of light across the wooden floor. Our small house, usually warm and brimming with life, was now shrouded in a heavy atmosphere. I sat at the breakfast table, my coffee long gone cold. Emily sat across from me, gently stirring a spoon in her bowl of oatmeal, her gaze pensive as if searching for a way to break the silence between us. Breakfast, typically a time for lively chats about new flower arrangements or weekend plans, was now filled only with the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, Emily set her spoon down, took a deep breath, and looked directly at me. "Michael, what about Noah?" Her voice was soft, but carried a weight of concern I knew she'd been holding since last night. Noah. Just his name was enough to make my heart clench a discordant beat in my chest, both painful and warm. Noah was Dylan's son, a 13-year-old boy with eyes that sparkled like sunlight filtering through leaves and a shy smile like a flower just beginning to bloom. His mother, my sister-in-law, had passed away a few years ago in a car accident, leaving an irreparable void in the boy's life. Her death didn't just take away Noah's gentle mother. It left a deep scar in Emily and me as well. We, who had been married for years but still had no children, found in Noah a spark of light, a dream unfulfilled. The dream of being parents. Ever since Noah was a tiny 4-year-old with chubby cheeks clutching a worn teddy bear, Emily and I had loved him like our own. I still remember the day he first toddled into our flower shop, Petal Haven, his small hands gripping the bear, his wide eyes marveling at the white daisies on the shelves. Emily knelt down, smiling warmly, and handed him a small flower. "Noah, do you like flowers?" she asked, her voice as soothing as a lullaby. He nodded, his smile lighting up like a summer sun. And from that moment, our hearts belonged to him. Every time Noah visited, he'd scamper around the shop chattering about kindergarten or his innocent dreams of becoming an astronaut or painting the whole world on a giant sheet of paper. Those fleeting moments filled the emptiness in our hearts where the longing for a child smoldered. We'd been married for 7 years and still had no children. Over those years, every negative test result, every time a doctor gently said, "Just be patient," a little longer, I saw Emily's eyes dim with tears. I held her, hiding my own pain. But deep down, I was breaking too. We dreamed of a child, someone to love, to raise, to hear their laughter echo through our little suburban house in Eugene. But fate hadn't smiled on us, and that longing, like an unquenchable flame, kept burning in our hearts. I remembered summer afternoons when Noah was younger, sitting on the shop floor with colored pencils, drawing childish pictures of a family, father, mother, and a boy in the middle, holding hands under the sun. Once he looked up, his eyes shining, and asked Uncle Michael, "Aunt Emily, can I call you Mom and Dad?" That question stunned us, our hearts stopping for a moment. Emily hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks, while I could only nod my throat too tight to speak. Deep down, we always hoped Noah could be ours, that he'd be a permanent part of our lives. And through his eyes, I saw he longed for the same, a real home where he was loved and protected. But now, as Dylan dragged us into his mess as my parents demanded I mortgage our house to save him, Noah's image loomed in my mind clearer than ever. If we didn't help Dylan, if he sank deeper into debt, what would happen to Noah? That innocent boy whom we loved like our own would be swept into a vortex of misery with no one to shield him. I looked at Emily, trying to find words, but my throat was dry. "Dylan," I muttered, my voice faltering. "If we don't help Dylan, if he collapses, who knows what will happen to Noah's?" Future Emily nodded, her eyes glistening with sorrow. "I know you're worried about Noah," she whispered. "But Michael, if we mortgage the house, we'll lose everything. The flower shop, our dreams, this home. How can we start over?" Her voice trembled, not out of fear, but because she too was torn between her love for Noah and the fear of losing everything we'd worked so hard to build. We sat in silence, the clocks ticking, a reminder that time waited for no one. Finally, I took Emily's hand, feeling the warmth of her palm. "Emily," I said, my voice low but resolute. "We can't let Noah suffer anymore. This house matters, but Noah is our family. If we don't help, who will protect him?" Emily looked at me, her eyes shimmering with tears. She squeezed my hand as if passing me her strength. "You're right," she whispered. "Well, do this for Noah. But Michael, we have to be careful. This is the only time, okay? We can't let Dylan drag our whole lives down with him." I nodded, my heart heavy, but slightly relieved. We made our decision. We'd mortgage the house to help Dylan pay his debt, not for him, but for Noah. It was the biggest sacrifice Emily and I had ever faced, but for that boy, we were willing to take the risk. That afternoon, I picked up the phone, my hand trembling as I dialed my parents. It rang a few times before my mother answered. "Michael," her voice came through, surprised yet hopeful. "I'll do it," I said, my tone stiff. "I'll mortgage the house to help Dylan." "But Mom, Dad, and Dylan too. You need to understand this is the only time. I don't want to hear any more requests like this." On the other end, I heard my mother gasp, her voice nearly breaking with relief. "Oh, Michael, you're such a good brother. I knew you wouldn't abandon him." She rambled on, thanking me profusely as if I'd just saved the world. But in my heart, there was no joy. Next, I called Dylan. He answered on the first ring, his voice shaky. "Michael, you're calling about that?" "Yes," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Emily and I will mortgage the house to help you pay the debt. But Dylan, this is the last time. Do you understand?" "The last time? Oh, Michael. Thank you. Thank you so much." Dylan nearly shouted, his voice dripping with exaggerated gratitude. "You don't know what this means to me. I swear it'll change." I cut him off, unwilling to hear more empty promises. "Just do right by Noah. Don't let him suffer because of you anymore." I hung up without waiting for a reply. The phone dropped onto the table and I sat there feeling like I'd just signed a deal with the devil. Emily stepped closer, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Did we do the right thing, Michael?" she asked, her voice soft but laced with worry. I looked at her, forcing a smile. "For Noah, we had to do this. But Emily, I swear, I won't let us lose everything." Those words were a promise to Emily, to Noah, and to myself, but deep down I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. That night, Emily and I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by a pile of papers, bank forms, mortgage contracts, cold numbers threatening to swallow our home. Outside, the rain poured relentlessly. Thunder roared, shaking the house as if the heavens disapproved of our decision. Suddenly, a series of urgent knocks on the door cut through the howling rain. My heart pounded, startled. "Who could be here at this hour?" Emily whispered, her eyes flashing with worry. I stood hurrying to the door, trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. When I opened it, I froze. There stood Noah, soaked from head to toe, rainwater streaming down his pale face. He clutched an old backpack, his small shoulders trembling in the biting wind. His eyes, usually bright with life, were red and filled with fear and despair. "Uncle Michael," his voice broke, blending with the sound of the rain. "I can't stay there anymore. I ran away. I have to tell you the truth." I stood rooted to the spot as if frozen. "The truth? What truth?" Before I could ask, Emily rushed over, pulling Noah inside. "Oh my God, Noah, you're drenched!" she cried, her voice thick with panic. She grabbed a towel from the cupboard, wrapping it around him, then hurried to the kitchen to heat a mug of milk. I stood there staring at Noah, trying to read something in his eyes, but all I saw was a deep, raw pain, as if he were carrying the weight of the world. "Noah, calm down," I said, keeping my voice as gentle as I could, though my heart was racing. "What's wrong? What happened? Why are you here in the middle of the night?" I sat down in front of him, placing a hand on his shoulder, feeling his small body still trembling. Noah bowed his head, clutching his backpack as if it were the only thing keeping him from falling apart. He hesitated, his lips trembling, then burst into tears. His choked sobs mingled with the sound of the rain, twisting my heart. "Uncle Michael, I overheard Dad on the phone," he said, his voice shaky and halting. "He said Mom didn't die in an accident. He arranged it for the insurance money." The air in the house seemed to solidify. I felt the blood drain from my body. Emily, holding the mug of hot milk, froze, dropping it to the floor. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed, but no one cared. She rushed to Noah, wrapping him tightly in her arms as if shielding him from his own words. "Noah, what are you saying?" she whispered, her voice stunned. "Are you sure? Could you have misheard?" But Noah shook his head, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I didn't mishear, Aunt Emily," he choked out. "I heard Dad talking to someone on the phone. He said if it wasn't for that insurance money, he wouldn't have survived this long. I've heard him before, too, when he's drunk, muttering about that accident. He blames himself, but when he talks to others, his voice is so cold, like he doesn't even regret it." I sat there numb. Noah's words hit me like hammer blows. My sister-in-law, her death was caused by my own brother. My stomach churned, a mix of rage and horror surging within me. But before I could speak, Noah continued, his voice growing quieter. "Lately, Dad's been yelling at me," he said, staring at the floor. "He says it's because of me that he's in debt, that I'm a burden." He paused, took a shaky breath, then slowly rolled up his sleeve. Bruises, dark and purple, marked his thin arm, stark evidence of the cruelty he'd endured. Emily sobbed, holding Noah even tighter, her tears falling onto his soaked hair. "Oh, Noah," she choked, her voice breaking. I clenched my fists, my entire body trembling with fury. Each bruise on Noah's arm felt like a knife to my heart. Dylan, how dare he lay a hand on his own son, blaming an innocent child? "Noah," I said, my voice barely recognizable. "You don't have to go back there. You'll stay here with me and Aunt Emily. I promise I'll protect you." The promise came from the depths of my heart, without hesitation. I looked at Emily and she nodded, her eyes filled with both pain and resolve. We knew in that moment everything had changed. The house, the debt, my parents' threats, all of it paled in comparison to the horrific truth Noah had revealed. I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the dark, torrential rain. Thunder still rumbled, as if echoing the storm in my heart. I had been ready to sacrifice our home for Dylan, for Noah. But now I realized saving Dylan wasn't the way to protect the boy. Dylan didn't deserve it. But Noah, the trembling child in Emily's arms, deserved a safe life, a life filled with love. And I, no matter what storms lay ahead, would ensure he never suffered again. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind reeling with Noah's words. He arranged it for the insurance money. The sentence echoed like a knife slicing through my heart. Dylan, the brother I once thought was merely irresponsible, now revealed himself as a monster. Not only had he abused his own son, but he might have been involved in my sister-in-law's death. Every time I pictured the bruises on Noah's frail arm, rage flared within me, burning like wildfire. But intertwined with it was a chilling fear. If I didn't act quickly, Noah would suffer more. He could lose his entire future trapped in Dylan's cruel spiral. Beside me, Emily was restless too. I heard her sigh, her hand finding mine in the dark. "Michael," she whispered, her voice from crying. "We have to do something. We can't let Noah go back to him." I squeezed her hand, nodding, though I knew she couldn't see me in the darkness. "I know," I replied, my voice low but firm. "I'll find a way, I promise." By morning, as pale sunlight slipped through the curtains, I had a plan. I couldn't just sit there letting anger and fear control me. I needed help, someone who knew the law sharp enough to deal with Dylan and protect Noah. The name Laura Bennett flashed in my mind, a renowned lawyer in Eugene known throughout the town for winning complex custody cases. I'd heard neighbors talk about her, how she fought relentlessly to protect abused children. If anyone could help us, it was her. I called her office that morning, and to my relief, they arranged an urgent appointment for the afternoon. Emily chose to stay home with Noah, ensuring he felt safe after the harrowing night. As I left the house, I glanced back at Noah sitting in the armchair, clutching a mug of hot cocoa Emily had made, his eyes still red but less fearful. "He'll be back soon, Noah," I said, forcing a smile. "Stay with Aunt Emily, okay?" He nodded. Lips pressed tight, but his eyes met mine with trust. That moment fueled my resolve. I had to do this, not just for Noah, but for my own conscience. Laura Bennett's office was in downtown Eugene, a small but elegant building with lush green plants at the entrance. As I stepped inside, Laura rose from behind an oak desk, shaking my hand with a firm grip. She was 46 years old, her blonde hair neatly tied back, her eyes sharp yet not cold. "Mr. Turner," she said, her voice calm and clear. "Please sit down and tell me everything." I took a deep breath, and the story poured out like a river breaking through a dam. I told her about Noah, the bruises on his arms, his chilling revelation that Dylan might have orchestrated his wife's death for insurance money. I described Dylan's massive debt, the pressure from my parents, and the decision to mortgage our house, which I was now questioning. My voice trembled with anger at times, choked with emotion when I spoke of Noah. I held nothing back, knowing that if I wanted to save Noah, I had to place my full trust in this woman. Laura listened, jotting notes swiftly in a notebook, her eyes never leaving me. She nodded occasionally or furrowed her brow, but didn't interrupt. When I finished, she set her pen down and looked at me with a blend of gravity and empathy. "Michael," she said, "what you've described is deeply serious. If Noah's words are true, Dylan isn't just an irresponsible father. He could face criminal charges, but we need evidence. The bruises on Noah's body are a start, but a 13-year-old's claims about his mother's accident will be hard to convince a court without something more concrete." I nodded, a wave of helplessness washing over me. "I know I said, but I can't let Noah go back to Dylan. He's not safe. He deserves a better life." Laura Bennett gave a small smile, the first since I'd arrived. "I agree with you," she said, "and I'll do everything I can to help. But before we take this to court, I suggest another step. A direct confrontation with Dylan. If we can get him to reveal the truth or at least concede custody, we will have a significant advantage. A controlled confrontation, carefully prepared, could make him expose his own mistakes." My heart raced as I looked at her. Confront Dylan. The thought both terrified and enraged me. I pictured standing face to face with him, questioning him about Noah's bruises and about my sister-in-law's death. Part of me wanted to punch him, but I knew that wasn't the way. To protect Noah, I had to be smarter, sharper. "All right," I said, my voice firm. "I'll do it. I'll face him." Laura nodded, a glint of approval in her eyes. "Good. I'll help you prepare. We need a specific plan, questions and approach, and a way to stay calm in front of him. Dylan may deny everything, but if you handle it right, we might make him dig his own grave." I left Laura's office with mixed feelings, anxiety, and determination. Driving home through Eugene's familiar streets, everything seemed different. The trees, shops, and passing faces blurred, overshadowed by the haunting image of Noah and his bruises. I knew the upcoming confrontation wouldn't be easy. Dylan, though a coward, was cunning. He wouldn't easily admit to anything, but I had no other choice. For Noah, for Emily, and for myself, I had to face him, even if it meant unearthing our family's painful past. When I got home, Emily and Noah were in the kitchen. Noah was carefully arranging daisies in a vase. He looked up as I entered, offering a faint smile. "Uncle Michael." "I made this for Aunt Emily," he said, his voice soft but proud. I looked at him, my heart swelling with resolve. "It's beautiful, Noah," I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'll do everything to keep you safe. I promise." The storm inside me hadn't subsided, but I was no longer alone. With Emily by my side, Laura's support, and above all, Noah as my reason to fight, I was ready for the confrontation ahead. Dylan would pay not just for what he'd done to Noah, but for everything he'd destroyed in our family. That evening, I arranged to meet Dylan at an old run-down bar on the corner of Oak Street, a place where years ago we used to sit together laughing and dreaming about the future. Back then, I still held a flicker of hope that we could be a real family. But now, as I stepped into the bar, the stale smell of beer and cigarette smoke hit me, and all I felt was a chilling emptiness. Rain still poured outside, each drop hammering against the windows, creating a steady, heavy rhythm, like the heartbeat of someone awaiting judgment. The air inside was stifling, the flickering neon lights casting a weak glow over the scarred wooden tables. I chose a secluded corner, sat down, and gripped the fake USB drive Laura Bennett had prepared. A ploy to pressure Dylan, though, it was nothing but an empty shell. Dylan arrived late as usual. He shuffled in his clothes, disheveled, his hair matted with rain. His eyes darted nervously as if he were already looking for an escape before the conversation even began. He sat across from me, forcing a weak smile. "You called me here to talk about the money, huh?" he said, his tone half joking, half serious. "I told you if you don't help Mom and Dad, will..." "It's not about the money," I cut him off, my voice cold as ice. I locked eyes with him, giving him no room to dodge. It's about Noah and about your wife's death." The air between us seemed to freeze. Dylan's face paled, his eyes blinking rapidly, but he tried to maintain a facade of calm. "What the hell are you talking about?" He snapped, his voice trembling slightly but still defiant. "Have you lost your mind, Michael? I don't know what you're on about." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I pulled a photo from my pocket, one Emily had taken of Noah that morning, capturing the bruises on his arm when he unknowingly rolled up his sleeve. I slid the photo across the table right in front of Dylan. The dark purple bruises stood out starkly against Noah's pale skin. An undeniable accusation. Noah told me everything I said, my voice steely. About how you've been beating him. About how you got drunk and let slip that your wife's death wasn't an accident. Care to explain, Dylan? He stared at the photo, his hands trembling, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "That kid's lying?" he shouted. But his voice cracked as if he didn't even believe his own words. "He's just trying to turn against his own dad. You're going to believe a child over me." I clenched my jaw, fighting to contain the rage boiling in my chest. He was the same as ever, always deflecting, always dodging blame. But this time I wouldn't let him slip away. I pulled the fake USB drive from my pocket and placed it on the table with a sharp clack. "Noah didn't just talk," I said, my voice low but razor sharp. "He recorded you. Want me to hand this over to the police in the courts? Want them to hear what you said when you were drunk about your wife's accident, about how you blame your son and beat him just because you can't control your own life." Dylan went silent. He stared at the USB, his eyes wide, sweat pouring down his face. His trembling hand reached for his glass of whiskey, but he didn't dare drink, as if afraid a single move would betray him. He didn't know the USB was a prop, a tool to corner him. But seeing his panic, I knew it had worked. "Michael," he mumbled, his voice weak, almost pleading, "you don't understand. I didn't mean to. Stop." I cut him off, my voice hard as steel. "Don't try to justify it. You have two choices. One, I take all this evidence to court and you'll lose Noah your freedom. And if your wife's death is investigated, you could spend your life behind bars. Two, you sign over custody of Noah to me and Emily right now. Choose." The bar seemed to fall silent. The rain outside continued, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Dylan stared at me, his eyes a mix of fear and hatred. He gripped his glass tightly, as if he wanted to crush it. "You'll pay for this." He growled, his voice low and threatening. "You dare go against this family, you'll regret it." I gave a cold smile, unshaken. "I don't care," I replied, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. "All I care about is making sure Noah gets to live a real life from now on. No more beatings, no more blame. Make your choice, Dylan." The clock's ticking. He looked at me, then at the photo of Noah, then back at the USB. Finally, as if all the strength had been drained from him, his shoulders slumped and he bowed his head. "Give me the papers," he muttered, his voice. Laura Bennett had prepared the documents and I'd brought them in my bag. I pulled out the stack of papers and slid them across the table with a pen. Dylan grabbed the pen, his hand shaking, his eyes still glaring at me, but he knew he was cornered. He signed his scrawled signature, looking like a mark of his own defeat. As he pushed the papers back to me, I felt a weight lift from my heart. But a new pain stirred. This was my brother, someone I'd once hoped could share a family life with me. Now he was just a shadow consumed by his own mistakes. I tucked the papers into my bag, stood, and looked at him one last time. "Noah's with me and Emily now," I said. "Don't ever come near him again. If you do, I swear I won't stop here." Then I turned and walked out of the bar, leaving Dylan alone with his whiskey and his failure. As I stepped outside, the rain still fell, but I no longer felt cold. A faint spark of light had ignited within me. Noah was officially ours now. Emily and I would give him the home and life he deserved. But I knew the fight wasn't over. My parents wouldn't accept this easily, and Dylan, even after signing, could still cause trouble. But in that moment, I didn't care. I'd done the right thing. And for Noah, I was ready to face any challenge that lay ahead. Just a few days later, the bad news reached my parents. I wasn't surprised when the doorbell rang sharply in the middle of a Saturday afternoon, urgent and piercing like a warning. Emily was at the flower shop, and Noah was in the living room carefully arranging a bouquet of white daisies he wanted to give to his teacher. I looked at the boy, my heart warming at his shy smile, but a sense of foreboding made my pulse quicken. When I opened the door, there stood my parents. My father's face flushed with anger, my mother's lips pressed tight, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. Without a word of greeting, they stormed into the house, acting as if it were their territory, not my home. "Michael," my father roared, his voice echoing through the small room, startling Noah, who dropped a flower onto the floor. "How dare you betray your brother, forcing him to sign away custody when he's desperate? That's a sin." He slammed his fist on the table, making the glass of water I'd poured for Noah tremble, the water sloshing over the edge. I stood frozen, feeling as if I'd been slapped. Betray a sin. I looked at my mother, hoping she'd say something to calm him, but she only clutched her purse, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Michael, how could you do this?" She choked out, her voice thick with accusation. "You're selfish. How could you take a child from his father, Dylan's, already lost his wife and now his son too? Don't you have a heart?" Her words stabbed into my chest like a knife. I stood tall, taking a deep breath, fighting to stay calm despite the rage boiling inside me. "You call me selfish," I replied, my voice low but sharp. "Do you know what Noah's been through? Dylan didn't just neglect him. He beat him. Those bruises on his arms. Want to see them? And do you know what Noah said, that Dylan admitted his wife's death wasn't an accident, that it was a scheme for insurance money?" The air in the room seemed to solidify. My father glared, his mouth opening but no words coming out. My mother shook her head frantically as if refusing to believe it. "That's a lie," she screamed, her voice breaking with pain. "Noah's just a child. He's making it up to turn against his father. And you, Michael, you've been manipulated by your wife, haven't you? Emily's turned you against your own family." I heard a faint sound behind me and turned to see Noah hiding behind the kitchen door, his eyes wide with fear. The sight twisted my heart. I stepped toward him, placing a hand on his shoulder, giving a gentle squeeze to reassure him before turning back to face my parents. "No one manipulated me," I said, my voice firmer than ever. "I did this for Noah. He came to us soaked in the rain, begging for help. He told us what Dylan did. I didn't take anything. Noah chose to escape that hell. I only did what was right." My father slammed the table again, his face crimson. "Right," he bellowed, his voice shaking with fury. "You call betraying your brother right? From now on, you're no son of mine. Michael, you've cut yourself off from this family." His words hit like a sledgehammer, but strangely they didn't hurt as much as they once would have. Deep down, I'd long known this family was never truly mine. My mother turned away, wiping her tears, but her eyes burned with resentment. "You'll regret this, Michael," she whispered, her voice icy. "You've destroyed this family." She grabbed my father's arm, pulling him out of the house, leaving their heavy accusations hanging in the air. The door slammed shut, and the house fell silent. Outside, the rain continued its steady rhythm, but inside me, everything had shattered. I heard soft footsteps and turned to see Noah still standing there, his eyes red, his hands clasped tightly together. Neighbors peered curiously through their windows, but I didn't care. I knelt before Noah, gripping his shoulders, looking into his eyes. "Noah," I said, my voice gentle but resolute, "you don't have to be afraid anymore. I won't let anyone hurt you. No matter who they are, he'll always protect you. You're my family now." Noah pressed his lips together, fighting back tears, then threw himself into my arms, holding me tightly as if I were his only anchor in the world. I hugged him, feeling his small body tremble, and in that moment I knew every pain, every loss was worth it. I'd lost my parents, lost the illusion of a blood family, but I'd found a true family. Not in empty words, but in the love and responsibility I felt for Noah. Emily came home shortly after, and when I recounted the confrontation, she took my hand, her eyes filled with both pain and strength. "You did the right thing, Michael," she said, her voice trembling but certain. "We'll give Noah a home. Whatever happens, we'll get through it." I nodded, pulling Emily and Noah into a tight embrace, my eyes blazing with determination. In the days that followed, Noah officially moved into our small suburban house in Eugene. He brought with him a few worn-out clothes, a tattered backpack, and a box of colored pencils he cherished like a treasure. Seeing him stand in the living room clutching his backpack, his eyes a mix of shyness and hope, my heart tightened. This house, once just Emily's and my sanctuary, had now become a refuge for a boy who had endured too much pain. I knelt before Noah, smiling. "Welcome home, kid," I said, and his shy smile was the greatest reward I could have hoped for. Noah's new life began with small but meaningful changes. After school, he would ride his bike to our flower shop, Petal Haven, to help out. He took delight in arranging white daisies, carefully tying ribbons around rose bouquets, and sometimes shyly suggesting color combinations he thought customers might like. Emily, with her gentle heart, always made time for him. She cooked his favorite meals, grilled cheese sandwiches, pumpkin soup, and chocolate chip cookies. He once declared the best in the world. Every afternoon she sat with him, asking about his schoolwork or new friends, trying to make up for the years he'd lacked love. Positive changes began to emerge. Noah grew more at ease, his smiles appearing more often, especially when we worked together in the shop. One afternoon, while arranging a bouquet of carnations, he blurted out, "Dad, Michael, does this look good?" I froze, my heart skipping a beat. Emily, standing nearby, stopped what she was doing, her eyes glistening with tears. "It's beautiful, son," I replied, my voice trying to hide the surge of emotion. Noah blushed, realizing he'd called me Dad, but then he smiled, and that moment lit up the room. Another time, he called Emily Mom, as she handed him a mug of hot cocoa, and I saw her turn away, quickly wiping tears so he wouldn't notice. Those small moments were proof we were building a real family. The neighbors started noticing Noah. They stopped by the shop watching the polite boy arrange flowers and couldn't stop praising him. "That boy is such a good kid," Michael said, Mrs. Linda, the bakery owner across the street. "Look at him working so diligently. Who wouldn't love him?" Her words filled me with pride, but also reminded me that Noah wasn't just our joy. He was becoming part of this community. He was slowly reclaiming the light in his life, and I was determined to protect it. But it wasn't all easy. Though Noah smiled more and opened up his emotional scars, lingered smoldering like unhealed wounds. At night, I often heard him jolt awake, his soft sobs drifting from his room. One night, I rushed in to find him curled up on his bed, drenched in sweat, eyes wide with fear. "I dreamed about Dad," he whispered, trembling. He locked me in a dark room. He hit me. I held him tightly, trying to soothe him, but my heart ached. Rainy nights were the worst. Each clap of thunder made him flinch, huddling in a corner as if the sound pulled him back to that terrifying night he ran to us. Emily and I did everything we could to help. On nights when nightmares woke him, we sat by his side telling funny stories or keeping the light on to make him feel safe. Emily encouraged him to join school activities, art club, soccer, to help him make friends and feel loved by those around him. "Noah, you're an amazing kid," she told him, ruffling his hair. "You deserve to be happy, and we're here to help you." He nodded, but his eyes held a flicker of doubt, as if he wasn't yet sure he was truly safe. We knew our love alone wasn't enough. Noah's wounds needed professional care. After discussing it, Emily and I decided to take him to a child psychologist, Mrs. Julia, a kind woman with a soothing lullaby-like voice. In the early sessions, Noah was reserved, but Julia was patient, using games and stories to help him open up. He's been through a lot, Julia told us after one session, but he's stronger than he realizes. With time and support, he'll heal. Slowly, we saw glimmers of hope. Noah began to share more, not just with Julia, but with us. One evening, he brought a drawing to the dinner table, a picture of a flower field under the sun with 3 people holding hands. "This is you, Aunt Emily, and me," he said, his voice shy but proud. I looked at the drawing, my eyes stinging. At the shop, Noah found joy in arranging flowers, using it as a way to express himself. He chose each bloom carefully, arranging them with a care I'd never seen in a 13-year-old. Each bouquet he made was a step forward, a sign he was coming back to life. One afternoon, as the 3 of us arranged flowers outside the shop, Noah looked up at Emily and me. "Can I stay here forever?" he asked, his voice soft but full of hope. I knelt down, took his hand, and smiled. "Of course, Noah. This is your home." Emily hugged him from behind. And in that moment, under the golden sunlight, I knew we'd found a true family. Not in blood, but in love and sacrifice. As the months passed, our lives gradually settled into a new rhythm. Noah, the boy who once trembled in the stormy night, had rediscovered the light in his eyes. His smile grew brighter, no longer shy or hesitant. Every day after school, he pedaled his bike to Petal Haven, eager to help us. Watching him, my heart swelled with pride as if he were truly my son. Our flower shop flourished like never before. Customers came not just to buy flowers, but to chat, to catch a glimpse of our little family, a family brimming with life and love. Mrs. Linda from the bakery across the street often stopped by, bringing a box of cookies for Noah and calling him the shop's golden boy. Mr. Mark, the coffee shop owner, would linger to share funny stories, making Noah giggle. Those simple moments filled our little shop with laughter and warmth. Our small suburban house in Eugene, once threatened by Dylan's debt, was no longer just a property. It was a sanctuary for faith protection and true kinship, the life Emily and I had built for Noah and ourselves. Looking back on the journey, I couldn't help but marvel at what I'd overcome. I was once the overlooked son, always burdened by my family's demands. My parents, who never truly saw my efforts, had expected me to sacrifice everything for Dylan, the brother they'd coddled his entire life. I once thought I'd forever live in his shadow, the forgotten child. But when Noah came into our lives, when he ran to our house on that rainy night, I found the strength to stand up for what was right. Despite facing betrayal and my parents' threat to disown me, I held firm to my convictions. At night, when the house fell silent, I often reflected on what had happened. I realized family isn't defined by blood. Family is those who stand by you, protect you when you're at your weakest, and are willing to sacrifice for you. Dylan and my parents may be my blood, but they were never my true family. Noah and Emily. They showed me what family really means. To save a child like Noah, sometimes you need the courage to stand against your own kin, to shatter illusions of false familial bonds. One crisp morning, as golden sunlight filtered through the trees in our garden, Emily, Noah, and I set out flower pots in front of the shop. Pots of yellow daisies, pink roses, and vibrant dahlia lined up as if telling a story of life and hope. Noah, wearing the tiny apron Emily had sewn for him, carefully watered each pot, his face glowing. Suddenly, he looked up at me, his eyes sparkling. "Dad." "Michael," he said, his voice innocent. "Can I take some flowers to my teacher today?" I froze, my heart skipping a beat. Dad. Michael. Those 2 words, simple yet powerful, brought tears to my eyes. I knelt down, placed a hand on his shoulder, and smiled. "Of course, Noah." I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Pick the prettiest bouquet. Your teacher will love it." Noah beamed, running into the shop to choose a bundle of white daisies. Emily stood beside me, squeezing my hand, her eyes shimmering with tears. Our story came to a close in that moment, under the radiant sunlight, as the three of us stood together outside the flower shop. Noah, clutching his bouquet, skipped happily, while Emily and I watched him, our hearts overflowing with joy. Our little house, the flower shop, and the challenges we'd overcome. They all blended into a complete picture, a symbol of a new beginning. We hadn't just found each other. We discovered the true meaning of family. Not in empty promises or blind favoritism, but in love, responsibility, and the courage to protect those we cherish.